again, we were expecting them to go into this window prepared to do stuff if opportunities arose, and they still might. But the vibe today was quite different from the one that was presented before Christmas.
Mr. Mark Critchley of The Athletic, welcome back and Happy New Year to you, sir.
Happy New Year, Steve. Good to be back as always. Thank you very much for having me.
The year is 2 days old. You've already been to Carrington, clocked in. How was it today, the first presser of the year?
Start as we mean to go on, isn't it? New year, new me. Not quite. The first press of the year. It was an interesting one actually. I think I don't know, people might have seen it by this point. It obviously goes up on YouTube on United's channels. I think it's one that you should watch rather than just read about. Because I think Ruben's mood was maybe the most interesting thing. He just seemed a bit downcast, a little stony faced. I saw one of my colleagues put on Twitter, and just a bit, yeah, a bit fed up. Maybe I don't know. Like he obviously the result the other night was a really bad one, and he will recognise that as much as anybody, and seem to. There wasn't that much discussion about the Wolves game. I think there's more a focus on, it's the start of January. It's not just the new year; it's a new transfer window. So there were questions on that. They were probably the most newsworthy items for discussion from the first section, the open section that isn't embargoed, and then yeah, and he was also asked obviously about just the number of absentees that they have at the minute because it feels like that is having such an impact on results. I don't think there's necessarily a lot of mitigation for the performance that we saw the other night. Um, I still think that a United side that was put out should be able to beat quite comfortably a team that has 2 points all season and is on track to go down in infamy as one of the worst in the Premier League era. So I don't think there's an excuse as such, but it's definitely important context, not only for that result the other night, but then going into this weekend and the game against Leeds at Ellen Road, which is going to be ugly. And I thought that anyway before um, Tuesday night and the Wolves game because of just having gone to this fixture a couple of times in recent years when Leeds were in the before their relegation. The atmosphere is going to be, yeah, horrible, I think, in more ways than one. And it's going to be a real test of character for his players, and it comes at a time when he's not able to call on too many, and he doesn't have the resources that he would like. So, yeah, transfers and injuries were really the two main takeaways from it, and we can go into that. But also his mood was a bit more down than we used to see him, and yeah, maybe that was interesting as well.
Let's go into the transfers then, because I mean, he's a Ruben's a straight shooter generally, isn't he?
Yeah,
He won't lead you down a path that to of dishonesty or anything like that. If he's he's saying that he doesn't expect any business. Obviously, it wouldn't be very self-serving to come out and say, yeah, we're desperate to get anyone because that's it's just going to jack up prices, isn't it? So there is an element of maybe he is keeping the cards a little closer to the chest. Maybe he does expect one or two departures. What's your gut feel on what might happen? Because obviously there's a long way to go before the end of the month. The general consensus would be that incomings would rely on outgoings, and obviously there's one or two prime contenders for that. Which way is the wind blowing in your mind?
I think that the message on a sort of macro, wider level going into the window was that the club was ready to do business and prepared to take advantage of opportunities that arise, but with the caveat that those opportunities would be a view. We're taking a view to accelerating things that would otherwise happen in the summer. So we're talking about long-term targets. We're not talking about short-term targets. We're not saying that couldn't we maybe do with a loan here or there, of Wout Weghorst, Marcel Sabitzer, that sort of thing. That is not the vibe and the message that I've been getting. I think long-term targets, anything that opportunities that they could push forward, because I think Ruben spoke about this himself. He's seen the mistakes that have been made in the past. Sometimes you can get desperate, and that can mean signing players to big wages who perhaps don't have a long horizon at the club, but it turns out that they do have a long horizon because you can't shift them on those wages. And ultimately, there'll be different takes on that. Um, People will look at the opportunity that's presented itself with this Premier League this year and how tight it is in this expanded, bloated middle of the table that we've got, and say, well, surely if you can make a short-term signing that gets you 6 points between now and the end of the season, that's the difference between finishing Europe and not finishing Europe, potentially finishing the Champions League places. It's so tightly congested in there that any signings you want to that you could make. I mean, the question that was put to him is it not worth pushing the envelope and bringing players in to get top four, top five? But his response was, and I think the interesting part of this was his response was more, I would say, pessimistic than perhaps it sounded towards the end of last month before Christmas, where he was talking about how, the essentially saying they would look to do something. And we know that United were interested in Antoine Semenyo from Bournemouth at that time. We know that he has a release clause of £65 million that can be activated early in January. And we also know through the reporting of my colleagues at The Athletic and David Ornstein that Semenyo ultimately prefers City. So that looks like it's not going to happen. I think given that this was really the first time that Ruben's spoken, and not so much at length, but openly about the transfer window since that news. It's the first press conference that we've had at Carrington since Christmas Eve when that came out, I think. Um, the change in tone was notable. Semenyo would have qualified as one of those long-term targets that I'm talking about. If that is now off the table, what does that mean? Take United at their word. I don't know if it means that anyone comes in this January. Now, things can change, right? And that is often the story with January. But we also know that January, the window, it's not traditionally a time that United do a lot of business. There was Patrick Dorgu and Aidan Heaven last summer, last year, sorry. But if you think before that, I think you have to go back to Bruno for the last permanent transfer who came in within that window. I think it was Bruno Fernandes. I know Ahmad joined after agreeing the summer before, but it's not generally a time where United do a lot of business. And again, we were expecting them to go into this window prepared to do stuff if opportunities arose, and they still might. But the vibe today was quite different from the one that was presented before Christmas, where Amorim's saying that more likely than not, he expects that there won't be anything changing, and there isn't. His line was that there's no conversations at present about changing the squad, ingoing and outgoing, I should say as well.
Obviously, the press sort of chat amongst yourselves. What is the consensus of where United are at going into the new year? 'Cause as you say, it's a very, very bloated middle of the Premier League. You got really two runaway teams. Aston Villa are doing very well. Beyond that, it's given how frequent the slip-ups are, it's a bit of a rabble, isn't it, really? You've got two very pronounced ends and then anything goes in the middle. So United have got opportunity after opportunity to really sort of press on now, but also could very much fall back towards last season's disastrous 15th. So what's the feel in the press pack?
Well, look, I think that there's uh, people don't people watch the performances and they're difficult to analyze in a respect. And it's been a season that is very difficult to take a hard and fast and solid line on, I think. Because they win games you don't expect, and they
Yeah.
don't win games that you expect them to. And that's part of the frustration, I think, with fans, because if you see them go to Anfield and get a result, um, go to Selhurst Park and beat a team who's unbeaten at home in 11, I think it was. And then that Newcastle game where I don't think a lot of people were expected too much. And look, the performance was back to the wall very much in the second half, but they're picking up points in places where that should be a bonus, if you know what I mean. Like if you accept that this team, and a lot of people do, and a lot of people don't, and think standards have been lowered and expectations have been lowered. But if broadly, if you accept that this team is from 15th last season, that improvement would be finishing sixth, seventh, somewhere around there, qualifying for Europe again, then pull the camera back, zoom out, and that's where they are in the table. But where could they be if they had won games that you were expecting them to win? What would it look like now if they'd taken opportunities to go for fifth? I don't know how many times we've said that before games of like over the last few months, but they've always missed them. Those I think of the four home games. Everton, as I mentioned, West Ham, as I mentioned, the 4-4 against Bournemouth, who, are a good side but really struggling at the moment. And then Wolves the other night. That's 3 points taken from a possible 12. I think I looked at it today. Look at the table. If you take all 12 points, they're second in the league, which I know it doesn't really work like that. And maybe they take points there and then don't take the points at Anfield and Selhurst Park and against Newcastle on Boxing Day. So within the round, maybe they're about where we expect, but there's these dramatic highs and lows. I mean, Andy Mitten on Peer with on Talk of the Devils, he keeps describing it as a roller coaster, and we were kind of debating the other night whether it's a roller coaster or not, because you don't usually associate a roller coaster season as veering between sixth and seventh. But I think we all know that the way that the modern United is covered in traditional media and in online social media, there's huge swings of reactions to any kind of result. And like I say, if you're going to pick up wins where you don't necessarily expect them, but then fail to when you do, then that's only going to amplify the reaction. And I think that's what we're kind of trapped in at the minute. And it can be difficult to come away from that and try and give a cool, measured response on where the team should be and where it is. I still, honestly, I have to think about this all the time. I don't actually know the answer to that question at the minute because I can understand people when they say expectations have been lowered to such an extent that this shouldn't really be acceptable. And if you take Ruben Amorim's record and look at it coldly, um, it's that of a manager who it would be under pressure and is kind of under pressure, I think. It's externally, certainly, people, and in the fan base, there's a lot of criticism of him. Um, Flip side, it's sort of where we expected them to be. And it's difficult in that sense to, again, find the right line to take and draw the right conclusions from what has been also a perfectly ordinary season when you think about where they are in the league and the performances, but also slightly extraordinary in the recent history of the club.
So, final question then, taking all that into account, expectations being the broader theme. Like you say, they don't tend to win when they should. They do tend to exceed expectations when, they didn't win, but you go to Villa Park and they played very well, I thought.
Mhm.
Going to Anfield, Selhurst Park, Newcastle, maximum points from those. So what's the expectation going to a Leeds team that's in form, but not particularly high in the table, and it's a derby as well with a ferocious atmosphere? What's the right thing to expect?
Ugliness, chaos. I don't, I'm not looking forward to it in one way. From the perspective of, I feel that it's a game that this United side feels vulnerable in. On the one hand, I would say, I don't know, this is sort of sounding like I'm sitting on the fence now. I feel like you look at Leeds at the minute, they're what are they? I think they're six unbeaten. Dominic Calvert-Lewin scoring almost every game. He's had another disallowed at Anfield last night. They've switched to this back five system, and we know that Amorim switched to the back three, the back five the other night because he was facing up to a back three and back five that Wolves play. So it wouldn't be a total surprise if he's playing that again on that basis, just on that basis. Um, yeah, I that's what gives me pause, I think, heading into this game. I also sort of think that one thing that Tuesday night against Wolves established was this pattern that we're seeing where if a team sits off, if they invite United onto them, if they challenge them to be the protagonists of a game and make the plays themselves, it doesn't seem to suit this team. I feel like I've said that for season upon season, no matter who the manager is. I think it's true of this one as well. I think that is an established pattern that we're seeing now. Is this game on Sunday going to be like that? I think if you were just taking on paper a newly promoted side against United, you would expect it to be, but this isn't that game on paper. Ellen Road's going to be febrile. It's going to be visceral, hostile, pretty horrible, as I say. And I think there's going to be a level of intensity to the game which actually could perhaps benefit United. I think that is what we've seen against Villa, against Bournemouth, against Newcastle, teams who want to come out and press. and go toe to toe and engage. And I think that United that suits them. I think even Wolves, I think even Wolves did it at Molineux. It was so open that game, wasn't it? And they played nothing like that at Old Trafford the other night. Not only because they were playing away from home, I think because they learned that if they did play like that, that would play into United's hands. Um, so if Daniel Farke, he would be wise not to do that. But I think the situation that demands that there's going to be a level of intensity to the game that might suit United, and I think that is one positive that they can have going into it.
Fingers crossed, like you say. I think the only certainty is that it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be a spectacle.
No, no, not at
You,
all.
you, the real sort of primal fan in you really relishes the occasion, but at the same time, it's one of those. It's City, it's Liverpool. It's just not there to be enjoyed. But we shall see. We shall see. Are you going? Are you going to the press box?
I will be there. I hope it's nicer than the last time I went there, which was in 2022, when it was absolutely biblical and the train station flooded, and I like jibbed it onto the last one home and just about managed to get back absolutely soaked through, having walked back from Ellen Road. I don't know why I didn't just get a taxi, but I don't know, I'm a glutton for punishment sometimes. So yeah, hopefully it's better than that, but that has set the bar for my expectations of this fixture at Ellen Road. And to be honest, I remember that it was a 4-2. It was exactly the sort of atmosphere we're talking about. United won. It was proper. I'm expecting a proper game on Sunday for exactly that reason.